Good evening. Good evening from Israel. Good evening if you're streaming with us from Europe. Good afternoon if you're in America on the East Coast. Good morning, late morning if you're on the West Coast. Anywhere else you are in the world. Welcome to our studio. My name is Dr. Tovah Goldfine. This is TMS Roundtable, where we've been meeting pretty much weekly for almost 4 years. This March, it'll be 4 years. And I'm not slowing down because when I meet people like Manya and different people who have healed themselves through the science and art of the methods of healing and really can share about it and really have understood what was going on in their body. And so I met Manya Ronay. It's a beautiful name. On Facebook. I didn't even know she lived in Israel because I saw that she had a story. And, you know, if anyone knows me out there, I just want to hear your story and hear how you did it and give people the motivation and the hope and the belief that it can happen. Yes, you can. And I always say it doesn't mean you're Dalai Lama's on the mountain. Manya is just a regular person, and so are you, and you can heal. And we're all struggling, and we're all getting on the other side of the struggle. And so I'm really happy to be here this evening. And Manya's going to share her story about her autoimmune symptoms and pain. And you're pretty young to have gone through that. Yeah. And let's have a dialogue and talk about how you can heal. Any questions, please feel free to put them in the feed and we will talk about them. So I'm so happy to meet you. We spoke a little bit and I'm happy you're here on my end of the globe. Yeah. So tell me about, but you're originally from Florida, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so talk about what was going on for you. You were living a normal life in Florida and?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Dr. Tovah. It's a pleasure. So I grew up in Florida. I always wanted to be a journalist. So I was actually on this pretty intense journalism track in high school. We had like an award-winning newspaper. I was editor-in-chief. I was really intense, perfectionistic, all the traits, overachiever, people pleaser. And then I went to journalism school at Rutgers in New Jersey. And 1 month into journalism school, I got sick and I was diagnosed with POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia.
Would you explain what is, say it slowly, and what is POTS?
POTS, it's a really long name, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. All that means is when you change positions, your heart beats really fast. And all that means is that your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, is kind of out of whack and it's not able to pump your blood properly when you stand up or sit up. It kind of pools in the lower half of the body. And so that's why you get a fast heart rate because the heart's trying to compensate. You can also get really dizzy and lightheaded and all sorts of symptoms.
That must have been really scary.
It was very scary. Yeah. Even sitting in class, fluorescent lights, I was got hypersensitive, noise. It was really scary. Yeah. I didn't faint. A lot of people faint, but I had pre-fainting spells and lots of fatigue and GI issues, the works. Everything the autonomic nervous system does was out of whack at some point.
So you were like in fight or flight.
That's exactly.
So you had to figure it out, but the doctors put a label on you. And then what did you do?
So the doctors, I'm actually very lucky that they put a label on me very quickly. And because some people are searching for years, and wow. The doctors don't believe them. They believed me, they put a label on it, but none of their conventional treatments were working. They had some medications. They said, eat a lot of salt and drink a lot of water to try to expand blood volume. So I was obsessive on my salt intake, mostly with processed foods because they're very salty. I didn't know anything about nutrition then. And it didn't work. And compression stockings, those are these horrible, tight compression stockings under my pants. Nothing was working. So then after my freshman year of college, I really was hit rock bottom that summer. I was trying to hold down 2 journalism internships and I was on the couch and really, it was like a whole system shut down. I would have weeks of I just couldn't move, could barely think. Yeah.
Wow. So it wasn't just that you your heart was racing, you had other autoimmune symptoms, and were you taking any medication from the doctors? Were they
Um,
prescribing anything?
yeah, there is some off-label medications for POTS. There is, midodrine, some blood pressure medication, which my first cardiologist, all he knew how to do was just to up that medication until I could like feel the blood rushing in my head. I was like, this is not
Wow.
but I stayed on that for a while, low dose, and there's also a beta blocker that helped a little bit. That's
Wow.
kind of slows the heart rate, and then fludrocortisone, which was I think supposed to help the kidneys retain salt or something again to boost blood volume. Nothing really helped.
Wow. So what were you doing? You must have been flipped out. You must have been scared. Were you, did you think this was forever? Did they like tell me
Yeah,
more about how you were dealing with yourself and how
yeah,
you're dealing with your fear and disappointment about your schooling and what this was
yeah.
causing?
Um, there was definitely a lot of despair. There was also so much motivation. Because I had all those overachieving parts of me, so they just went into overdrive to try to heal.
Yeah.
And, you know, as soon as the doctors pretty much weren't able to help, I was really fortunate that a family friend recommended a holistic practitioner, and she was the first one who brought my attention to food. And then I realized, wow, food and lifestyle actually matters. And this was a process. This was because I had no idea. I was so divorced from my body. Um, and
Wow.
and that really started my recovery journey because I got some power back. She's like, um, you're not like your health isn't dependent on the POTS fairies that just decide, to strike you with symptoms. Like you do have control. And so that was the start of really, starting to change my life around.
And did you see change of symptoms when you changed your food, or you just the hope of the food changing it was
Ah,
enough?
um, I noticed the food helped my GI issues right away. I switched, from ultra processed foods to mainly real whole foods.
Right.
Um, it didn't touch the neurological symptoms so much, like the dizziness and the fatigue. The next thing I did was acupuncture, which helped a ton, actually. It got
Wow.
me like 50% better. My blood
Wow.
was flowing better. The nervous system was more
Good.
regulated.
So some kind of energy, which acupuncture does, it's movement.
Mhm.
Some kind of it regulated something in your nervous system, and you probably felt relaxed. Aha. So there was your first bit of you relax, and you thought, if I relax, then something changes in my nervous system.
Yeah. I still had no idea, about the mind-body connection. I wasn't ready for it. My treatments, once I got into the holistic world, started with the external things, like food and then acupuncture, this external practitioner. And then slowly, went more internal, But I remember once being introduced to Sarno at some point in college, and I was so not ready for it. I was like, what do you mean it's in my brain? Like the symptoms were still too bad. I was, yeah. So it took a while until it was like the right time, Yeah.
No, it's so important to realize that, because it's, even though Dr. Sarno says, you really need to believe 100% the symptoms are psychologically driven. Um, Not all of us are ready, and yet you can also heal not believing. You can, look, I'm having physical symptoms. They're physical symptoms. The pain is real. The symptoms are real. The cause is a journey.
Yeah.
And what you just said at the beginning of the conversation, the solution is you. We are the solution. Without sounding too new agey, we are the solution. And doctors don't say, well, so what's, so what's going on? Did any doctor ever say to you, so what's going on in your life?
I had one cardiologist. Okay, I wound up in the hospital once because I was like so sick and out of it and scared, and so I was in a dorm, and and like my partner I think took me to the hospital, and I remember like my I don't know, some of the people in the dorm weren't so happy that we just go to the ER, but I went to the hospital and they admit me? Maybe. And then when they would discharge me, because they couldn't really help with anything, they gave me a nice packet of information about POTS. And they recommended a new cardiologist that some of their POTS patients went to and had success with. So I went to her. She was very nice. She was the first person who spent like a very long time with me. And the most she talked about my life was existential living. I still don't really know what that means, but she said you have to think about your existential living. And that was the first doctor who said something that it might be connected to my life, but it was no practical exploration.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So then what? So then what's going on? So basically acupuncture helps. You're thinking maybe it has something to do with me, but I'm not ready to understand that. And
Yeah.
then what happened?
So then, my senior year of college, I was watching some documentary and I heard about the dynamic neural retraining system, which is a brain retraining program. And the universe is so amazing that it brings you the tools you need at the right time as you're ready for them. So this system, DNRS, said nothing about emotional health. It was like, actually, don't go into your traumas. And it was all just the cognitive work. It was my introduction to mind body that I was open to at that time. It was like, you're fine. It gave me the background. This is your brain stuck in fight or flight. I could buy into that. And it was all kind of just cognitive control of trying to tell yourself, like, I'm okay. And it actually helped a lot. It helped reduce a lot of fear. It gave me the confidence to go to Israel after I graduated. And it wasn't enough, but it was a big step.
Yeah. Listen, not everybody, look, people have book cures. These are still, I just met a woman here in Israel who has chronic pain for years and years, and she's a movement therapist, and she's a smart woman. She's a professor, and she read Sarno's book online on the computer, and she couldn't sit for 20 minutes. She couldn't sit without pain. She sat and read the book online for 4 hours and read the whole book. And she realized, oh my God, I just read this book. And she literally saw that she could sit. And so that was an intellectual cure, more like, oh my God, I could sit, because she was focused. So it's something with the brain. But many of us have to get there through the emotions. Some of us are not going to get out of it without walking the road from the head to the heart. And that, again, is not like new age, you got to love yourself. It's like the language we speak to our brain, understanding how our emotions affect our nervous system. So therefore, so get ahead. So you figured it out, brain wise, and you regulated your nervous system. Then what happened?
So then I was in Israel. I was still having crashes every now and then. They were getting shorter, but I wasn't totally healthy. So then,
symptoms? What do you mean totally healthy? What was going on?
So I was still, I was on a program. I was teaching English to boys in an elementary school, and I was still getting very overstimulated by noise and by lights. And then I think I would just overdo it, which was really just my nervous system going into fight or flight mode. And then I would sometimes crash for a couple days, which meant like I couldn't really think, I couldn't really walk. I was just kind of like in bed for a few days until my nervous system
sounds extreme. Like you were up and then you were way down, nothing in between.
Right. I mean, there was some dizziness and stuff in between, and I knew when I was overdoing it, when I had to take a break. But my, now I don't really crash at all. It's like, I think I'm so in tune to my body. Then if I'm not feeling well, I just, take a break.
You're really in touch with what you're feeling and what you're simply like, if you have any symptom, you're like not reacting. You're like, oh, there's a symptom. And that's a biggie with responding. Oh, I'm having a symptom. I wonder what's going on underneath. So, so now you're leading up to like something changed for you in the emotional end, because that's where you really did your healing.
Yes. So what happened was, there was one more chapter in Israel that year. I was reading Bruce Lipton's book, The Biology of Belief, and he wrote about Psych K. And then I figured out that there's a Psych K workshop coming to the Old City in Jerusalem, and I signed up for it. And it's this. Have you heard of this, Tovah?
Well, I just ordered the book. I love Bruce Lipton, and I've just ordered the book for someone's bringing it from America. I just ordered the book, The Biology of Belief, because Bruce just talks amazingly about programming and how we're programmed until age 7, and then our conditioned mind listens to our program mind, and that's the conflict. But what is Psych K? And I think it's interesting to the audience because what is Psych K?
So I'm not going to explain this as well as, I think the founder, I think his name is Rob Williams. You can Google Psyche, but it's about changing beliefs on the subconscious level. And, it's really interesting. It's about, you know, we like cross our arms like this and we muscle test. And it's about crossing the arms like this is about creating a whole brain state. It's about uniting the two brain hemispheres to change beliefs.
Like one brain, like one
Right,
brain.
right. And it really worked, changing some beliefs, especially around like lights and activity, which was, I realized, just calming down the threat response. But now I was just learning about EMDR, and they're doing the same thing,
Yeah.
creating this like whole brain state,
Yeah.
uniting the hemisphere.
There was a woman on my show who was this 70-year-old like marathon runner
Huh?
who needed hip surgery, never got it, like amazing woman. And she was talking a lot about journaling with your opposite hand.
Ah, interesting.
So go ahead. I didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt.
no,
Go
it's
ahead.
okay. So Psyche was my introduction that the subconscious mind really matters, right? Because DNRS was just focused on the conscious mind, right? But Psyche, in the wisdom of the universe, I didn't have to go into specific traumas or specific emotions. It was just very simple. It was just kind of like picking a belief that you want, I am healthy, and then doing a balance for it. So it was like such a soft introduction into the subconscious. So then COVID hit March 2020. I went home to Florida. I met my husband like a month later on Facebook. And we got married 6 months later, which is totally crazy. It was all just
A Facebook love affair.
yeah, yeah. And as soon as I got married and moved out of the house, that's when I started getting hit with some unconscious memories that started bubbling to the surface. And how I explain that is, we have this kind of conflict growing up between authenticity and attachment, right? We need our attachment, our connection to our caregivers. So often we squash some of our authenticity, some of our gut feelings in order to
In order to
maintain
get
that
love.
attachment.
Yeah.
Exactly. So as long as my, family was my main attachment system, it wasn't safe for my system to feel a lot of this stuff and to be aware of a lot of, some childhood memories and stuff that was stored in my unconscious. But as soon as I got married and was in a new environment, it was safe to start working on this stuff. So it started bubbling up. I started going to therapy. My husband was like, you gotta go. I was really anxious, really depressed. And that's when it all started. That's honestly that it was a lot. I realized I was codependent. I realized that pretty much all my relationships were codependent. I realized like how disconnected I was from my body. And that started me down the journey of real healing.
See this, I want to make a point to our listeners and to you and to every, when we realize these things, it's like not an opportunity to judge or beat ourselves. It's to be like, wow, aha, wake up, like notice, recognize, accept, witness. Like none of us are immune. We all have that part of us where, we're evolving. And so part of us gets stuck there because they can't accept that that's kind of what created maybe the pain. And that's exactly what's going to heal the pain because our thoughts do harm us or hurt us, and they can help us and heal us. And the thought can be, I accept that I am insecure. I accept that I, without blaming our parents, but also honoring and, putting responsibility where it belongs. But, like I will mention how every time I speak to Dr. Clark, who is the gastroenterologist that's really involved in the work and the PBDA, he's always saying the way you heal is to be a butterfly on the wall of your childhood. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's all? He's like, that's it. And so we're talking about compassion. So when this was going on, your husband was saying, I want you to go to therapy, but there must have been compassion and love and hope. And somehow you were trusting that this was the way out.
Yeah. Yeah. I was physically doing better, but I was in such a dark emotional place,
Good point. You're physically, the symptoms shifted and now you're with your feelings.
Yes.
And that's also part of the journey and not an easy place, but it's the way out.
It's the way
Thank
out.
you for saying that.
Feeling the feelings. Yeah. Yeah. If you don't feel the feelings, your body's going to feel the feelings, because they got to come out
Well, if
somehow.
you, yeah. And so talk a little bit about how you were able, because like, oh, feel your feelings. Yeah, 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 yeah. But like, tell us more about how
Yeah.
you were able to connect with yourself, stay in that place which is not comfortable. Tell us more about how you were able to do that.
Yeah. So for me, the golden modality for that was internal family systems, IFS. And I was introduced to IFS from my therapist in Israel. My husband and I moved to Israel 6 months in. I found this therapist right around the corner, and she just happened to practice IFS on me, and it happened to be a really good fit. So IFS is about getting in touch with our different parts. I mentioned the part of me that was an overachiever, a perfectionist, a people pleaser. These are all parts, like little sub personalities that can take us over. And parts of us hold wounds. They're really young parts that got kind of stuck in traumatizing scenes. It doesn't have to be capital T trauma. It can just be being overwhelmed by feelings and not having a person to help you process them. Um, and so in IFS, what we do is we help people get in touch with their parts and connect to their parts and befriend them, even the parts that we really don't like. Like now I work with, food addiction. And so we work with the part that's binging, and we find that all parts have positive intentions. They just get extreme because they're trying to protect us from pain. Yeah.
Kim, yeah, Kim joined us, and she wants to know what IFS is again.
Yeah. It's internal family systems. It's a type of therapy created by Dick Schwartz.
Yeah. And for anybody who knows Dr. Howard Schubener, Richard Schwartz and Dr. Schubener did some
Yeah.
YouTube some courses together. So it's not so different than some of the John Sarno work or the Unlearn Your Pain or Unlearn Your Anxiety. It's not so drastically different, but its approach, because I'll talk to people, and I think, Scotty's a therapist here, and he'll talk to people about um, your little girl.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe bring it into like your little child.
Right.
You were having to reparent your little child, and
Yeah.
tell us how you're able to do that, and how that healed you, how that healed your
Yeah.
anxiety.
So, well, Sarner talks about repressed emotions, and so in IFS, we have these little exiles, these little wounded children who are often holding unconscious memories that we're not conscious of, and they were repressed because they were too overwhelming. And so, what we do is we connect to those little children. Once we get permission from the protectors, like the overachievers, the people pleasers who are protecting them, protecting us from feeling those painful feelings.
Yeah.
So once we get permission, we connect to them and we hear their story. We witness them. We sit with them in the way they needed. And we can even do what's called a do-over, where we go back to the scene and reenact it in a way that's more empowering. And
Yeah.
that's been shown actually to change the brain, to rewire those
Yeah,
networks.
I think for anyone who's still not so familiar with IFS, it's also when we go and we rescue our little child, because most of all the voice or the unconscious mind, which is the body, is programmed up till 7 years old, which we've learned that from some of the the experts in our field, that up till seven. So it's almost like you're working with this 1 till 7 years old, and the traumas, the big T's or little T's that happened, even with the best childhood,
Yeah.
we might have come out losing our authenticity to get attention. And then there's a book by Dr. Gabor Mate about when the body says no. It's because we're saying yes all the time, because that's how we got our attention, but we denied parts of ourself.
Yeah.
So I think we always talk about parts. And now this Dr. Richard Schwartz, brought into detail about the parts. But so there were some deep emotions that you were repressing, and that's why your physical symptoms,
Yeah.
that's why your body, so what deep emotions
Yeah.
were you repressing?
Yeah. I mean, I've been in IFS therapy for a few years, and now I'm an IFS practitioner, and it's amazing the memories that come up, that even from when you're pre-verbal, right? People say like babies don't remember. They remember. It's just implicit memory instead of explicit. It's stored in their bodies instead of, conscious narrative memory. I just had a client today who we found a part who was traumatized during birth, and yeah, and we could be with that part because we're conscious, as soon as we're able to experience, even in utero, we're sensing the world, we're picking things up, so
Super
there.
sensitive.
What's that?
You're super sensitive.
Yeah.
Super. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's so much of this material that's stored in our bodies as images and sensations, thoughts, feelings. Um, so in IFS, we slowly connect to whatever needs to be witnessed and seen in our systems. Um, and and we start, like I said, with the protectors. And for me, my physical symptoms were protecting me from, for example, from not being able to say no, not being able to set boundaries. So my body would shut me down because I wasn't able to tune into how I was feeling and then say no. So that was one strategy my body used.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So it would give you a fast heart rate, lower back pain, gastro symptoms, dizziness,
Yeah.
almost fainting, in order to protect you from a possible threat. Like the body perceived a threat from your emotions being repressed.
Um, yeah, it's possible that around certain people these emotions were getting triggered and then my body had to shut me down, but I think it also worked in a more general sense that like when I just wasn't able to be in touch with myself and say no and stick up for myself, I think my body just didn't feel safe.
Right.
It didn't feel like I could protect it, so then it had to shut me down I had no boundaries, so part of shutting me down was getting some distance, getting
Right.
some
Right. I
space.
don't have to deal with my emotions if I have the physical pain.
Exactly. Right. And, physical pain in my family and in lots of families is really respected, you know, as
Right.
a,
Like if you're anxious, it's like something's wrong with you as opposed to physical pain. Oh, something's really wrong with you.
so
Wow.
it was a brilliant strategy that my body chose. Um,
Wow.
and, for the back pain, I haven't talked about that yet, but it's a fascinating story. I found, my back pain started when I was driving to meet my husband when we were dating at a spring. It was like an hour and a half away. And as soon as I got out of the car, or maybe the next day, my back was hurting for a couple days. I was like on the couch, and it came back here and there. Once I was on the couch for a week, and it actually brought me back into the mind body world after a few years, and that was when I really got into Schubiner and Alan Gordon, Gordon's work, The Way Out, and using IFS. I've been able to figure out that when my back goes out, it has something to do with connection to my family. It's like really, really worried about my family. And when I'm able to connect to that part, it actually my hips look out of balance, when my back goes out. Because I'm emotionally out of balance. And so I noticed it's like that conflict between attachment again and authenticity. It's like because I've been working so hard on developing myself after neglecting myself for so many years, that sometimes this part is like, don't forget, about your attachments too,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Well, you're literally building a new relationship with the pain.
Uh-huh.
And that's hard for people to understand, um, because pain intuitively means something's wrong, but not this kind of pain, not these kind of symptoms. And even when somebody's dealing with other autoimmune symptoms, it's coming from it's coming from some imbalance in the immune system. I mean, again, I happen to, fly the flag that every autoimmune symptom and every type of even look, I've met people who healed MS and cancer and heart disease. And so I'm not saying that this is the work that somebody has to do when they have heart disease or cancer, but there is enormous amount of healing that can happen emotionally, psychologically from this work that can help people even be with their symptoms better. They have it's almost like we're not here to find a cure. We're here to find a way we can live with ourselves and find out why our body's expressing itself. It's what's it trying to say? What's the message? And what we're finding, without sounding too new age, is that there's deep repressed emotions that are triggering, the amygdala, the brain, to want to protect us. And that creates a whole nother autoimmune chemical, cortisol, adrenal thing that is mind blowing. And so it reminds me just where one of the doctors that Dr. Schubiner interviewed, she said that she would tell her patients that your symptoms are your superpower. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how you did not feel like a victim of your symptoms, but how you saw.
Yeah.
Talk more about that, because I think people need to really develop the confidence that they can heal, and there is possibility. It may not be exactly like you did or I did or how people did, but there is always a way out.
Right. So, before I even started the emotional work, before I found IFS, I had this awareness from my journey and from everything that I was discovering, from nutrition to acupuncture, to the mind body stuff, that I was being guided, and that, I had to, stay sick in a way, because I kept on learning more things, that I needed to learn to get me to where I am today. And so I remember feeling frustrated because I trained in all sorts of different modalities. And I was like, why can't I just find one modality that works? And then I can be like this practitioner. And, I was like, why do I have to try all these millions of things? And I realized, like, I had to stay sick to have symptoms. So I would keep searching, until I could learn more. Yeah. So I had that awareness. And then I gained a lot more respect for my symptoms when I started IFS, and I started dialoguing with them. And I was like, wow, this is not random. I gained so much respect for POTS when it told me that, it had to shut me down because I couldn't say no myself. And here's a crazy story. I mentioned I had a lot of light sensitivity, and I still do sometimes with fluorescent lights and computer screens. And I was sitting on my couch. I used to have a really hard time on Saturdays. My husband and I would be reading a lot on our couch. And by the end of the day, I would feel so like drained and dizzy just from the light. It wasn't even fluorescent. It was just from the living room light. And I remember just doing a little like IFS meditation. And I saw these little like invaders kind of like invading my brain. And that's when I realized that it had something to do with boundaries. And as my boundaries improved, my light sensitivity improved. It had something to do with creating like this safe like container. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you also trusted that your body had the answer, and that you weren't going to be a victim of light sensitivity, that you had to understand. And also, was it possible that you just were around light and you just dialed down your sensitivity rather than react? You just kind of, okay, there's a bright light here, so I don't have to react. I can be a 3 or a 2. I don't need to be a 10. I don't need to have this alarm, light, 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 as opposed to,
Right.
I'm not comfortable. It's not
Right.
comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, maybe it was more subconscious. Like with light, I did not do that consciously, except in America, I get really overwhelmed in the giant grocery stores, and I can't spend more than like, I don't know, 30 minutes in there. It's like I'm bombarded by all that stimuli.
Yeah.
And so maybe there I'm like, I listen to safety affirmations. That actually helps.
Yeah. So so just let our listeners know
Uh-huh.
what felt threatened. Somehow, some part of you
Right.
felt threatened. What was your nervous system, protecting you from? What was the threat?
It was, I think, just a bombardment of stimuli. I think it was just so much information, so many people and things and choices. And it was so big, it just felt overwhelming for my system.
Yeah, but you were like you could have been like, I don't need this. Like, I'm here. Like, somehow you were. That's boundaries.
Right.
Somehow that was like coming in, like these invaders.
Right.
And
Exactly.
someone else could be like, okay, it's light. It's a lot of people. It's almost like you were able to focus more on what was best for you.
Mm-hmm.
Was, if I have to go into this big store, I'm going to deal with it. I'm not going to freak out.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow you were able to, and now you can probably be in a big store without freaking out, but you might not be comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, and I still leave after like 30 minutes. It's finding that balance of like taking care of
Yeah,
myself, you
yeah,
know?
big, important.
Yeah. I noticed that, so with DNRS, the first brain retraining program, that was all just about consciously, controlling, like, I'm okay, I'm safe, not reacting to symptoms.
Yeah.
It was all about ignoring the body. It was like, ignore your symptoms. There's nothing wrong with you. And then I realized at some point that, like, wait a second, like, I was always ignoring my body. Like, this can't be the way out. And then, there's the other end, which is when we're hyper focused on our symptoms, right? And that's not good either, because that keeps us in fight or flight. So then I realized a happy middle ground where we're lovingly attending to ourselves. So yeah,
Excellent. That's Alan Gordon's statement. Like
yeah,
lovingly
yeah,
attending, yeah, and like noticing there's some pleasant sensations, there's some not so pleasant sensations. I can handle them all. Excellent.
yeah. Yeah. So still sometimes I get dizzy with the fluorescent lights and I can tell myself I'm safe and I can also leave after a bit. It's that balance,
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's very important. So do you feel that maybe you dealt with a lot of, was it anger or fear? Was it sadness? Was it
Oh,
guilt about maybe some past things? Was it,
ah,
what was maybe one of the main emotions that you,
right. Yeah. So, anger is an interesting one because my first therapist in Florida before I moved to Israel and found IFS was like, I think you have a lot of repressed anger. It was one of our last sessions, and I was like, what? And and I realized over the course of therapy, often when I'm telling really terrible stories, I'm smiling, and it's just a part of me, the people pleaser part, that's trying to keep things light and everything's fine. That was instilled in me from my environment, and
wow.
yeah, yeah. So accessing a lot of anger was really important. And there's of course a lot of sadness. I've always had like weeks where I've just felt depressed and I was never able to like accept that until very recently, and I started working with it with IFS. It was fascinating. I realized that it was like the depression was like here kind of numbing me out, keeping me in my brain, and when it agreed to kind of soften back, all of a sudden I felt so much anxiety in my body. I was like, wow, it was keeping me up here feeling numbed out so I wouldn't feel so uncomfortable in my body. It was fascinating.
So what do you do with I lost my train of thought, but you said that you you had it wasn't anxiety, you said it wasn't anger, you had all these so yeah, how do you live? This is it. How do you be with your anxiety? How do you accept your depression? How do
Yeah.
you decide? Depression is just a sad feeling because I mean, the word depression is a heavy word and I don't like my clients to use it, and doctors use it so freely. I mean, depressed is just depressed. It's like there's compressed, there's depressed. I don't think it's a heavy word, and all of us experience highs and lows. I mean, this is not life is not like this, So how did you accept, embrace,
Yeah.
understand that being not happy all the time is part of life? But tell a little bit about that because that's a biggie.
Yeah.
Because we're human beings and we want pleasure, we want everything to be good. We don't want it. We don't want, we really,
Yeah.
we don't learn this in school. And this would
Yeah.
change everything for us if we could learn it in school.
Yeah. I thought my whole life, I thought something was wrong with me, that I had all these ups and downs. Even now, like my husband is like really like stable and flat. And I feel like for so long, I felt like something was wrong with me, that I have these ups and downs. I could get triggered easily. I can be in a really good mood and then get triggered and then come down. And just very recently, I've just been accepting like, okay, these are just emotions. I'm okay. I can contain them, you know? and and really being able to sit with the parts of me that are feeling sad or anxious or depressed, and just hearing them and just recognizing that I can feel bad and I can still be okay. I can be this safe container holding whatever is going on inside of me, has really helped. It's just that acceptance, because there was so much shame, around feelings of depression and anxiety. And it's like, no, it's okay. We're human. Howard Schubiner says that all the time. We're human. That's why we have mind body pain.
Yeah, Michael Galinsky talks about this disease called being human.
Yeah.
No,
So,
shame. Listen, and then there's the guilt, which Rose would talk about a lot. There's the guilt, and there was someone who gave me a great definition of guilt. The guilt is the ultimate, ultimately we want to do good. That's what guilt comes from. Ultimately, we want to do good. So there's the people pleaser. There's the person who's feeling bad about. And so what you're saying is if we can recognize all those players, all those parts, all those players, all those different people, all those emotions, and just fully loving what is, or, whatever arises, love that. It's almost like, and some of my work lately has been, you're doing the best you can. Ultimately, people with TMS or mind body symptoms, the majority of people in the world, we're good people doing the best we can. And for people who aren't so good, we get to forgive them because they're ultimately doing the best they can. Ultimately, that's the humanness. We're born pure. I'm not going to get spiritual on everybody or, religious, but we're born pure. That's partly like what Bruce Lipton talks about. Like, we're born amazing, beautiful, pure, whole. And then we're programmed for 7 years. And then we got to deprogram that for the next, 90 years. We got to shift that. And that's the chronic pain world. And that's the place. But there's enormous hope.
Yeah.
And I would really say acceptance and enormous compassion and love and trust and belief that we're doing the best we can. What would IFS say about doing the best you can?
Yeah, Tovah, I was just going to say this, that the most profound concept in IFS that Dick Schwartz discovered by accident, by talking to his clients, was that when he asked the parts to step aside, for example, perfectionistic part, angry part, at some point, all clients, no matter who they were, no matter what crimes they committed or what traumas they've endured, had this core self, capital S self, which is just the soul, and he found in everyone, the self has these common characteristics. That's compassionate and calm and curious and connected and courageous. A couple other C's.
I love it.
And everyone has that. And it's such a profound concept because, most of the time when we're in pain or when we're feeling, a really hard emotions or we've had a lot of trauma, we think like that's us, that we're depression or we are, our pain. But in IFS, we're showing that like, no, the core of who you are is this calm, confident,
Wow.
connected person. And the parts are like the clouds and they come and they go, but the self is like the sun. And so that's what we do. We help people access their self. And from that place of self, which is compassionate, curious, we get to know the parts and we find out all the parts have positive intentions, and we help them heal.
Wow. I really love that. I love it because my latest thing the last few weeks I've been talking about, you can't heal a body you hate. Because that's a conflict and that's the brain wanting to protect you from a great big lion, which is called you. And you're just a toy lion wanting authenticity, wanting love. And, Rose would say, we're made for love. And I'd be, Rose, that's a little bit, mushy. She goes, no, Tovah, this is science, So we are made for love. And all of us want love and attention. That's all of us really want. We want to do good. We want love and attention. We want to be authentic. And like you said, the pain comes for, if people can see the pain and the symptoms and see the ultimate purpose and meaning possibly in their not being balanced, and that we spend the rest of our life working on balance. How do you learn balance? I stand on one foot. If I'm not swaying back and forth, I'm not learning anything. It's like, how do we learn? By the movement and by the change. And so some of us don't have to fall. Some of us can fall and get up. And I think I like that you mentioned, because some of the Sarno's work is about the personalities that get sick and that get chronic pain. And we're never here to blame you for who you are now. And this work doesn't change who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You evolve to be a healthier you and literally have a relationship, and so where are you at now with your symptoms now that you're, married and you're working here? I mean, like, what goes on now? Tell us what happens when you have a symptom. Do you freak out a little bit? Do you?
For a while, I thought, I had a friend who's like, you should like be on these recovery story channels. And I'm like, no, I can't. Like, I'm not fully recovered. And then at some point, I'm so grateful for her. At some point I realized like, no, like I can schedule my day. I used to have no idea how I would feel the next day. I couldn't schedule anything. And, I feel fine most of the time. And I still can get a little dizzy, or tired. And like this morning, I was a little tired. I'm like, okay, took it easy. Um, so yeah, so for a while, I thought if I'm not fully recovered, I'm not in this world, right? Like I don't have the right to be in this mind body world in the recovered space. And then I
Wow.
realized that no, it's more about like how you respond to your symptoms. And so now if I have a symptom, I don't freak out. Like even my back pain, even when I'm totally crooked, I tell my husband, there's nothing wrong with me. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, no, there's absolutely nothing wrong with me. This is my brain. And it goes away the next day. And it's such a big shift
Wow.
from earlier this year with the back pain. When I got back into the mind body world, I was so obsessed with like, what side am I sleeping on? And I put my hip out of alignment, and I was going to the chiropractors and all that. And I've been able to do the shift. So I'm actually grateful for the back pain because it got me back into the mind body world, after the POTS stint,
Yeah.
So yeah, I occasionally get back pain, especially when those parts, those are parts that attachment and authenticity, when they get a little like too much on the authenticity side, the attachment is like, don't forget about me. And
So you really know your symptoms really speak to you. You really have a way that you communicate, and you don't get freaked out or scared. You're like, okay, what are you saying, body?
yeah,
What's your message?
yeah.
Wow.
And you don't always know. Like I can try to journal or dialogue with the parts, and the most important thing is just not freaking out, you know?
So
Yeah.
it's responding. That was a big thing with some of the work that Michael Galinsky did with understanding. Like he said on one of the shows, if you Michael Galinsky was the director of and star of the movie All the Rage about Dr. Sarno, and he turned me on to a book called The Presence Process.
Hmm.
And in that book, this guy had searched 6, 7, 8, 9 years for a cure. He had horrible trigeminal neuralgia and all this facial stuff, and he searched all over. This guy named Michael Brown. And in the book, he talks about if all we did was just respond to ourselves, that would be 99% of the cure. And guess what? We respond to our friends, we respond to our children, we respond to our little animals, we respond to our boss, respond to our spouse, we respond to everyone, but we react to us. And so this is another key of like noticing and recognizing where are you reacting, where are you responding, and what are you taking on? What pressure are you taking on that's weighing you down, that's causing enormous symptoms from the pressure.
Yeah.
So we're back to awareness. We're back to witnessing, responding, getting better at feeling rather than feeling better. And I think it's like a language that you speak and that I've learned to speak, and some of the listeners here. There's some people out there in the Facebook feed. If you want to ask Manya any questions, we're going to say goodbye in a few minutes, but we're here. If you have any questions, you want to have a discussion, you want to share anything about what you're going through. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
And
yeah,
can I just share one more thing, Tova?
please.
Yeah. And I also just want to say, when I say like, oh, just don't freak out about the symptoms, I want to validate like, if there are parts of us that are freaking out about the symptoms, that makes sense too. So much sense. And in IFS, we spend time with them and we validate them. And like, of course you're freaking out. And,
Yeah.
a lot of my parts are nervous about when they're nervous about things now. they're kind of stuck in the past when I was really sick. And so I'm updating them like, no, I can do more things now, and I'm going to take care of myself. And, and that's really important. It's not like this tough mental process of I'm fine. It's really
I love it.
to everything that comes up.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. It's like loving the part of us that is nervous, accepting the part of us that is worried,
Yeah.
loving the part of us that messed up,
Mm-hmm.
because that part, I mean, really, I think we all talk like that and not realizing that we're doing IFS.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really, it was a discussion that I didn't expect to go this way, because we had a few people who've talked about IFS, and I didn't understand it so much. And I know it's really amazing work, and whoever and whatever work you use to heal yourself. I mean, I have a Fred Amir's coming back, who has a book called Rapid Recovery, and he had years of every symptom you can name, years as a grown man. I mean, and he figured it out, like a rapid recovery. Rapid recovery. And he did all these things we're talking about, but he figured it out, and it was, a couple of months and he was better. And another guy who I didn't have on my show, but I met him, Adam Heller, who has a program called Zero Pain Now. And he's like, if you work with me for like a month, your pain's going to be gone. And I'm like, okay, I'll refer you lots of people. I mean, I don't know what's going to work for everybody, but none of us are doing anything so different than these basic universal laws of nature, which I want you to end this program tonight with, the universal laws that will help us all if we apply and implement. What are they again? Because you said them so beautifully.
Well, so the first thing that's popping in my brain, I'm going to say it, even though I don't know if I'm answering your question. I talked about repressed anger, that my first therapist was like, I think your anger is repressed. And I just am realizing that when I got back in touch with that anger, it's very connected to being able to set boundaries and to protect ourselves. So for me, getting in touch with how I actually felt and then being able to speak up for it and set boundaries and protect myself was really the key in my recovery, getting in touch with your feelings and then protecting yourself so your body doesn't have to.
Yeah. And important to say, and that's something we have to learn, because we weren't taught that.
Right.
And if our boundaries were crossed, which some of us have traumas where our boundaries were crossed, we have to set up the boundaries. We have to create those boundaries. And that's a skill that we can learn. It takes practice. It takes repetition.
Yeah.
But what else? The boundaries is a biggie. What else?
Yeah. And I just want one more plug for boundaries. I just want to say, like, it's actually dangerous when you're not able to stand up for yourself, to connect to your gut feelings and to stand up for yourself. You can wind up in some pretty bad situations. I was in relationships, that could have wound up very badly if I didn't snap out of it because I couldn't say no. So really, really important for me, boundaries.
And you had to forgive yourself for them, because it wasn't the other person's thoughts as much as yours, because you were not being honest.
Right.
So what else? What are else of some universal laws of healing, no matter what kind of therapy you do?
It's like that word
laws?
honesty, Tovah. It's being honest with ourselves first, with how we're feeling, instead of just pushing it away. No, I shouldn't be feeling this way, right? Accepting how we feel, being honest with others, right? It's authenticity. It's hard. It's really, really hard when we don't want to disappoint people. We don't want them to be mad at us. And then loving the parts of us that, are the people pleasers, that are anxious. And then, the little wounded children in us, when the system feels safe, loving those, being the parent that they needed, really, taking care of ourselves.
Yeah. There's a word that I recently learned in a therapeutic situation with myself a few years ago, but I remember the word. And the therapist talked to me about reclaiming yourself. Yeah. And that, the pain will continue until you can reclaim. And this is sort of like, we're back to really, like, even the party that would laugh when you were talking about something serious, like, rather than judge yourself, you reclaim that was your survival mechanism. and most of us are living. Oh, Rajesh is wonderful. I just have to interrupt. Rajesh wrote an amazing book called, wait a second, don't tell me, um, The Straw That Broke the Camel's Back. And he healed from horrific back problems and did this zero pain now work. And he's now doing it with Adam Heller, and he's on a healing journey. And I'm so happy you're here. Because I don't think anything that any of us are doing is so drastically different. Because even I had a conversation with Adam Heller, and he'll probably be on the show at some point. But we're all talking about the way that the brain and body work together, and the conscious unconscious mind building a road between the two, knowing yourself, loving yourself, accepting yourself, loving the part of you that you don't like.
Mm-hmm. Which is just another part. It's just another part that doesn't like it, because yourself accepts all.
And I can live with the part that I don't like. I can live with the part that it's like I have a little YouTube quoting the author of Eat, Love, and Pray.
Eat, Pray, Love.
Eat, Pray, Love. And I do a little YouTube, and I send out a little written thing, because in her book, she's talking about, okay, shame, come on in, shame. Oh no, anger, you can't come in. No, anger, come and sit next to shame. You guys can be together. No, fear, no, you don't belong. Okay, fear, come and be together. You could all be together and be next to me and be together. And it's fabulous. And I'll send this out. I send it out a lot to people, because she's talking about reclaiming, and loving. We have history. We have, and there, so I just get off on this topic, and I'm happy to see Rajesh. He's in Florida. He lives in Florida, and he's a great book called The Straw That Broke the Camel's Back. I just love that title. So, how do you want to say good night to everyone? Because we've had some nice people visit that I haven't seen before. And how would you like to end it? For the new year, what would you like to leave with our audience? And also, you can find Manya on Facebook. She's around. We're available. So what would you like to say to people as we round out the evening?
Thank you all for being here. And I just want to say, I'm not special. Anyone can get in touch with themselves. And the only thing stopping us is parts that don't feel safe. And for good reason. For good reason, they, squashed our feelings to protect us. But, when it feels safe, we can get in touch with ourselves gently, as slowly as we need, and start healing, And my motto for 2024 is authentic connection, because we've been talking about how authenticity and connection could seem kind of like counter to each other, but really they're not. Really, they need to come together, and they can, by us reclaiming how we feel and being honest with others.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And honesty, I say it's like being naked with your clothes on. I mean, honesty is always not pretty,
right?
But not pretty is freedom.
Yeah, it's freedom. And it's health too.
Yeah. So I'm always happy to see everyone out there, and this will be on YouTube this evening or tomorrow. And I'm going to be back every week until I'm not, but I just keep meeting amazing people like you. And if anybody out there ever wants to be on the show, it's actually very healing. I'm anxious every week before, and then I get comfortable and calm. So I get to play out being the part of me that's anxious for doing this. And I'm not here with Rose, and now I'm on my own, and I'm a big girl now, wearing big girl pants. Rose would say, put on your big girl pants. And it's also very healing to talk about what's going on, what went on, what's the future. And so it's almost like a little bit of journaling, verbal journaling. And so anybody ever needs our help, Johnny Limitless, I would love you on here someday. If anyone ever needs my help, I'm available. Manya is a therapist. We're here to support you. And the best is yet to come. So happy that I met you. And thank you so much for sharing your heart and being so honest and real with everything. And we'll meet again.
Yeah.
All right. Take good care. All the best. God bless.
Bye.
Okay, 1 second. Oh, wow.